this is Super Dave here, coming at you from Progwarts. Welcome to the next installment of my Newbies Guide to Progressive Rock. This time, I will be providing recommendations for starting your exploration of the modern progressive rock masters. For the first two installments, and if you haven't seen those yet, my guide to the classics and progressive pop, go find those now and then come back. What I realized as I move forward in this series is that we have reached the advanced courses now, really. Those were the 100 level courses, these are 200 level. If you made it through the first two feeling excited for what's coming next, that's great. The artists we're reaching at this point are those who grew up listening to most of, if not all of those ones I reviewed previously, and they took the lessons learned to heart and they took things a step further. What that means is it became increasingly difficult to find albums that are as gentle to the new listener as the others. And this collection is going to feature less mainstream music, more complexity, more adventurous approaches, and there's no escaping the extended compositions, so deal with it. They're part of the DNA of prog rock by that point, and these came out. Nonetheless, I did my best to maintain the approach and spirit of the first two editions of this series with getting ones that are most accessible as best I could find them. It also made my task somewhat harder because there are so many artists out there making wonderful music of high quality that selecting just 5 albums at this point made me feel like I was unfairly leaving out some great artists. But what you have here is a collection of music representing not just some of the biggest artists in modern prog, but the pillars of current progressive rock. Some of the most prolific and influential artists in the genre who have joined the forefathers in influencing the next generation of prog artists. Once again, presented in chronological order, because it only makes sense. All right, first we have Marillion's Season's End. Now this one is a little tricky, as Marillion's origin falls between classic progressive rock era and the modern era, with their debut occurring in 1983, which led off what is called the neo-prog movement. However, they do continue to turn out albums acclaimed by critics and fans alike, having won the Prog Magazine fan poll for Best Artist and Best Album for 2022's An Hour Before It's Dark. No small feat. The point being that, despite the fact that it's been a long time since their debut, they remain active and vital, and honestly are revered in the progosphere as much now as when they started, maybe more so. So this album actually was a turning point in Marillion's history, with vocalist Steve Hogarth joining the band after the departure of Fish, who fronted the band for their first 4 studio albums. At the time, as you would expect, fans were worried about whether someone would be able to fill his shoes, and Hogarth answered those questions emphatically from the start. No doubts. The album launches with the Grand Prog of the King of Sunset Town, which really gives the new singer the opportunity to show his chops. And then it moves through a series of complex and tuneful compositions, things from wistful ballads, hard rockers, multi-part musical journeys filled with emotion. It's really an excellent starting point for those who want to get into the band and familiarize themselves with this era of the band. It's accessible songwriting, standalone songs, so we're not talking about all these big interconnected things going on in this grand concept. But they still get a foot firmly planted in the prog camp. So if you enjoyed this one, then what I recommend is following it up with some of their more complex and traditionally progressive albums. Brave or Marbles are great options. Right? Or perhaps even that wonderful 2022 offering I mentioned. Next we have Spock's Beard, Day for Night. This came out in 1999, so 10 years after Marillion. And Spock's Beard is the band in which Neil Morse started his musical career, and he is a name that is huge in the world of progressive music, active over the years in at least a half dozen total projects, including his solo work. The dude is busy. This album's a great starting point for Spock's Beard, as it features their wonderfully complex blend of prog and blues and rock and pop music, owing a lot to clear influences from the Beatles and really Neil's enormous capacity to craft great hooks, even in the midst of a long-form prog composition. This is one of their few albums with no tracks over 10 minutes in length, so easier to digest chunks is really what I mean. All right, well, okay, technically, until what they call side 3, that's true. That's where it's actually a side-long suite of songs broken down into separate tracks under the title of The Healing Colors of Sound. So, all right, maybe that last one's really long. I told you, it's going to happen. One of their best and one of their most immediately catchy albums, really. Now, if you like that, you want to explore further, just go with the next two in order, with a V or 5, whatever you want to say, or Snow. The next two albums in their catalog are really, really solid, some of their best as well. They're also the last two before Neil left the band for his other pursuits. So things changed for Spock's Beard after Snow. Next, we have Porcupine Tree, In Absentia. Starting out as a hoax, this band really was a one-man bedroom project. They eventually morphed into an actual 4-member band. Their original primary influences being mostly psychedelic space prog, like Pink Floyd, for a great example. They grew over the years to include more mainstream prog elements and highlighted by pop and metal flourishes down the road and the mixing of other genres. This album, released in 2002, introduced new drummer Gavin Harrison to the fold, and he's kind of become part of the classic lineup. And this was also kind of expected to be their commercial breakthrough, with all the groundwork having been laid over the previous 10 years at that point. Now, while it wasn't a huge commercial success as far as the progosphere was concerned, it is a milestone. It is a classic. It's a blending of pop and alternative and electronica and some prog metal. There's a future video link to this one that we'll get to next video. Elements of all these things in this one album made it an immediate hit with the prog crowd, if not, again, a commercial hit. But it's ultimately regarded as one of their best. Pop hooks interspersed with death metal riffs are the backbone of the opener, the deceptively upbeat tone of which camouflages the dark lyrical content. The more straight-ahead rocker, it's a fan favorite that comes next. It's powerful, but pretty simple chord progression and absolute live favorite would be Trains. Meanwhile, they still have time to mix in some quieter, spacey moments later in the album, even have room to fit in a bouncy, yet cynical, that's their trademark, pop song. They don't do sweet, really. Their early to mid-aughts output is really consistent and solid. So if you want to continue the exploration, you could also do well to check out the more challenging Dead Wing and then Fear of a Blank Planet. Basically, it's a 1, 2, 3. Though Dead Wing contains one of their most gorgeous pop songs, Lazarus. Absolutely worth checking out. Next, we have what is at this point in time really the granddaddy of modern prog supergroups. That's Transatlantic. The album is The Whirlwind. And this group brought together some of the biggest names in prog rock and prog metal. Two of the bands on this list, and one from an upcoming video, all contribute members of this four-piece band. This was a prog supergroup for the new generation. They've got all the instrumental gymnastics you could possibly want, plus great songwriting, impeccable performances, just such fine output for them in pretty much every album. Members Neil Morse and Pete Trewavas of the aforementioned Spock's Beard and Marillion, respectively, are half the band. The other half, or at least part of the other half, we'll get to soon. Everything you heard on the albums I mentioned from them previously in this video up to the present is up in a couple notches. It's just turned up. It's still accessible at the same time. Nearly every Transatlantic album is considered a classic in the genre, but this is the one considered by many to be their best. So this is where you could go with, but honestly, you can't go wrong with either of their first two albums either. Just be prepared. You're going to have to deal with some very long form songwriting here. These guys on every album have at least one, if not two, 25-plus minute songs. They're not messing around. They're not kidding. And then finally, in this group of 5, we have Big Big Train, Common Ground. So, as noted, there are a lot of bands that I could have chosen to put on this list. Just so many groups out there putting out such great, high-quality music, pretty much of equal level quality. What I did was I chose these guys because they have, one, of course, been among the top of the more traditional prog rock bands. And while revered in Europe, they're still making inroads into the U.S. Matter of fact, as I am saying this, they are going to be having pretty much just about their first 4 live performances in the U.S. Very small tour. But those who hear them universally praise them, really. This album in particular earned them, along as Marillion did, these guys got Album of the Year on Prog Magazine Readers Poll the year before Marillion, and this one truly represents some of their best work. Normally, their music is highly melodic, very accessible. This album's no exception. It does contain some lengthy tracks, but for those not ready for that quite yet, there's only one of them much longer than 8 minutes. So it's a little easier to digest quickly than, say, Transatlantic, who we just talked about. They got this jubilant track that's the lead off, The Strangest Times. Then they get a proggy rocker, Black with Ink. And then they move into a sweet ballad, Dandelion Clock. And then there's the epic, that one that's more than 8 minutes. It's 15 minutes, by the way, Atlantic Cable. These guys are never harsh, pretty much always hopeful in their lyrics and melodies and upbeat. And this makes them, and this album in particular, pretty much easy to connect with. There's not all the cynicism that you might associate with, say, Porcupine Tree, for example. For other examples, their album, The Underfall Yard, is also considered a classic, and they've got a new album due out soon, The Likes of Us, which would also be an excellent option for follow-up. As it's not available, I'll just note, I've heard the advanced copy of it, and I know it's really good. So, something worth considering. So there's your 5. Now, extra credit time. If you go through these, you're ready to continue to challenge yourself, kudos, good for you. I like your adventurousness. It's time to really stretch yourself a little bit more and listen to some more unusual examples of progressive rock. They're going to be a little bit different, a little more offbeat. The first is the Mars Volta, Deloused in the Comatorium. So, honestly, this one's considered a classic in the genre. It leans in a little towards the metal side at times. It's some of it, it's got some harsh riffs and distorted guitars that you don't as frequently hear in prog rock. But really, it's really a rewarding listen in the way that it blends those influences along with alternative rock and prog into something that really is truly unique. These guys have a sound all their own. And for future reference, it's also a nice bridge from here to progressive metal for those that want to take that trip with me later. And then as a second extra credit, extra credit we'll call it, we've got Devin Townsend, Empath. Devin has a lot of albums out. He's done a lot of things. He is one of those artists who dabbles in a little bit of everything from metal to progressive to pop to progressive metal to country to orchestral to ambient. Dude does everything. And this album pretty much has all of those. It's truly a musical journey through the career of a multifaceted musical genius. Yes, I said genius. And Devin really, really embodies what it means to have no limits in musical scope. He will try and do anything and do it well. He's also one hell of an entertainer live, let me tell you. I've seen him 3 times. The dude's amazing. So, those are my recommended albums for you to work yourself into the world of progressive rock, modern progressive rock, if you're on that journey. These guys, right, not as famous, not as well-known names as those on the previous lists for classic prog and prog pop, but definitely worth taking, definitely are taking, rather, the genre farther in terms of complexity and innovation. These guys are stretching the boundaries, and these are going to provide you with some more challenging listening experience, and some of them, likely, are going to take multiple listens to fully grasp everything going on. This isn't like a one-and-done, instant-click thing for most people, and that's okay if it takes a little bit more time. It's these challenges, though, that help us grow, really, in the end. If you want to grow in your prog acumen, dig into them. Now, if you're planning to continue on this path beyond this video itself, great, thank you. Appreciate you joining me along. I suggest you join me then for the next video, where we're going to focus on 5 recommendations for learning about progressive metal, where you got all the mind-expanding complexity melded with the head-banging aggression of metal. So very cool and honestly some of my favorite stuff because I just like the hard edge things. It's where I'm at. So, if you could also subscribe to the channel while you're at it, give me a like. That would be wonderful. If you enjoy what I'm doing, it would be great to have you follow along on my adventures in the progosphere, hear new interviews, great artists coming on, reaction videos, educational videos like this. Also below in the description are the social media links if you want to follow me there. And don't forget, I've also got a live 365 channel called The Expanse, featuring nothing but progressive rock and progressive metal. The link for that is also in this description. Woo! I talk for a living. And hey, we've added Brain Salad Sundays to the mix on The Expanse, which means every Sunday you get to hear the classics of 60s and 70s progressive rock. Meanwhile, that's all I've got for you for now. Remember, never fear to deviate from the norm. Keep it proggy. And this is Super Dave, signing off.